she said to me, oh, right. Oh, not 90 because actually...
Hey Joe!
Hello.
I have to start off with Hey Joe, don't I, really?
Well, Jimi Hendrix did.
He did?
He did.
That's a story
Yes.
that we'll come to in a while, I hope.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of stories, I've been thoroughly enjoying myself over the last few weeks. Every night, taking this to bed. And what a book! Because I've been reading about Mersey Beat all my life, pretty much, well, certainly since the early 60s. And most of these stories, never heard any of them before, so absolutely fantastic.
It is a story about my life. It's my life story and memoirs.
It's one heck of a life.
It's not just a Beatle book.
It's an amazing life. And I'm not the only person to feel that way, because I believe not only have I got this book at home, but there's somebody else kind of special. I noticed something up on your wall just before that I've pulled down.
Yes.
Can you tell us the story of... let's show this, and we'll show it to the camera in a moment. What's this all about?
Well, let me tell you,
Yeah.
if I can handle it while I tell you. I was sitting here one day, as I do most days. I have a tray, lunch, sit here, watch the news. It's a regular thing with me. They call me the man of habit. And the phone went, and a big deep American voice said over the phone, Mr. Flannery. I said, yes, speaking. So he said, well, I'm speaking to you from the American Embassy in London. He said, I'm responsible for keeping the library up to date with any books or literature in any way that the President might be interested in, whichever President is in the White House. He said, it's my job to keep that library up to date. He said, I've had a phone call from the White House saying that the President has been reading the reviews on your book, and he's very interested, as he is, a Beatle freak. They're the words he used. He said, the President is a Beatle freak, which sort of proved it because, as we all know, like Paul McCartney is never out of Buckingham Palace in the presence of the Queen. She favours him for his lunches. They have special lunches every day and whatever. And Paul McCartney's on that list, lunch list. Same with President Obama. He's had Paul McCartney in a few times. He's awarded him with one or two accolades and whatever. So it was easy to sort of put it together. But as the guy went on, I did think it was a hoax in the beginning. I thought, this is somebody trying to get a book for nothing. And I wish they'd just say to me, we like your book, and is there any chance he'd given me one or whatever. But I let him speak on, and then as it went on, I said, well, I think I would like to be in a position to send the book direct to the President, if you would allow me. So he said, well, we can't do that because you might send an insult or put a terrible greeting in your book or whatever to him. So he said, I said, well, I can tell you I do like the President of the United States. I like President Obama. And I always thought, and I said it from the moment I seen him when he was going in to be President, I said, I like that man. He's not reading anything. He says everything from the heart. And that's why I like him, really, because that's the impression I've got of him. And whatever his politics are or the way politics go, you can be up one minute and down the next. I wouldn't like to be the President of the United States. I wouldn't even like to be the Prime Minister of England. But they're the jobs that they've got to be done. And anyway, he said to me, you sound a nice enough gentleman, he said. I'm going to take a chance and give you the address to send it direct to the President. So I said, thank you very much. And he gave me the address, and I don't mind reading it out and let it go public. He said to me, the address is 6000 Pennsylvania Avenue.
That's a good area.
What a title for a song, eh? Anyway, he said 6000 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington DC, United States of America. So I said, right. And it was 2 minutes after the phone went down, I put the tray down that I had ready in the first place. That went on the table, out to the post office. I went and got a bubble envelope, got my book tucked in it, safe and sound, put a nice greeting in it to him, not forgetting to put at the end of the greeting, God bless America. And off it went, and then a number of weeks, I would say 6 to 8 weeks, went by, and I was saying to me, I won't hear no more about that book, it's gone now, it's, you know, whatever's happened to it. Even if it gets lost in the turmoil of the White House, they're the things that go through your head. Anyway, sitting here again with me tray, and I had a flop on the floor in the porch outside, and I went out, and there's a huge yellow envelope, and across the top of it said the White House, Washington DC, USA. And my nerves, as we say in England or Liverpool, my bottle went. You know. So anyway, I couldn't wait to open it, and out pops this. I brought this letter out, which I'm very proud to own, as you might see. It's in a gold. It's wood, in a gold frame, which I couldn't wait to find. I looked purposely for this frame, and I wanted to get it in a frame, and I think it deserves to be in a frame, and that's the letter.
I would say it deserves to be in a frame. There's autographs going.
And I'm very proud of this. And then now he's in a different light to me when I see him on the news or something like that, and sometimes it ends up by saying, oh yes, the most powerful man in the world, and I just say, I've got a letter from him to myself.
And he's got your book.
And he's
got more importantly,
and he's got my book. Yeah. So I had the cheek to follow up with the Christmas card when Christmas came. I didn't get a reply.
Did you not?
I might.
You might.
You never know.
Christmas is coming.
Always Easter
again. Yeah, there's always Easter. That's a great story. So the story continues, doesn't it? I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean, what a life reading this book. Can I take you right back to the start?
Wherever you want to go.
Our show is about Mersey Beat, but let's go back further.
Right.
Was Liverpool a musical city when you were a boy, when you were growing up?
Yes.
Were you aware of this?
Well, I didn't have anybody in my family who was, I could say, was successful or a big name in show business. I did manage my brother Lee Curtis in the early days, but we were a musical family like all the families.
So as a child you were growing up in the 40s? I'm trying to do the maths. I was never good. I left school before maths.
Yes, I grew up in Huyton, just outside Liverpool.
Okay.
We lived in the city because my mother had shops in the city. And she had 6 children, 6 of us. And the time came when we were told by our school that we were going to be evacuated. So I was thrilled to pieces with this, because the mention was that we were going to North Wales, to farms, and being sent out to different people's farms to be evacuated. And I was excited about this. I immediately bought myself a small suitcase. It's no bigger than that. It's upstairs. Still got it.
Really?
And I was starting to put little things in it, like a comb and whatever else that you might need.
How old are you at this point?
I was about, well, I was born in 1931.
Okay.
Now, get your maths going. 1931. And I was at school when the war started. I would be 8, wouldn't I? So 8, be about 10 when they were talking about evacuating us. So my mother picked up very quickly that 6 of us, 6 children, were quite excited about, we're going away, and I started it, I've always been the one to look into things and say, come on, let's do it, let's go. Let's sing or let's dance or whatever. Probably the lively one in the 6, you know. A typical, what's his name? Billy Elliot, is he? Typical Billy Elliot, me, when I was young. And anyway, my mother got the 6 of us in line, and whenever she had us in line to tell us anything, whether it be telling us off, or telling us something nice, or we're getting ready for Christmas, or whatever, she always put us in age, the oldest to the youngest. And now she had us, the 6 of us, in front of her. She said, now, I'm going to tell you, I've got a house for us to go and live in the countryside. Huyton, Well, in those days it was the countryside. It's quite big now, another one of Liverpool estates. And but it was countryside then, and that's where she took us.
It's not Wales, is it?
No, no, but it was lovely. We were quite happy with it. But these were her words on that day. I'll never forget it. She said, "If you die," and as she's saying it, she's pointing at each one of us. "If you die, I die. And if I die, I'll die with you. We're sticking together." And that was typical of my mother, you know. So that was, I lived a happy time. We all did, the 6 of us. We never knew there was a war on. My mother was, a part of her family came, the original part of her family came from Hanover in Germany. And she used to say to us, "Don't worry about the Germans. If they come, I'll talk to them. I'll talk to the Germans. They won't harm you. Don't worry." And we were really strong by this. You know, we used to go to school and say, "Oh, my mother will be able to talk to the Germans." And they all wanted to be our friends because it was a frightening time. I mean, the place was blowing to bits. And that was my mother anyway, her attitude towards the war. And
musically, you say you were Billy Elliot. I mean, what kind of music was grabbing you? Can you remember the first?
Like most people who are in or done or have been in show business, they always say, "I used to do concerts in like a back garden or something like that." Well, I really did. We had a garage at the back of the house which was unused because my father was in the army at the time, and my mother was mother and father to us, and I used to pinch sheets and curtains, belonged to my mother, do a little stage at the back of the garage, and we'd have a concert, and we'd charge a penny or something like that.
Singing or
singing and dancing and
comedy, the whole.
Best part of it was, which is a joke lately in my family, that we used to pinch we only had one sister. She was the oldest, 6 children, 1 girl, 5 boys, and it was nothing for me to get the boys upstairs and rummage through my sister's wardrobe, and they were all girls, dressed as girls, including myself, and they were the similar, I suppose, coming up to the Tiller girls or whatever you like to. I mean, we'd be falling all over the place, but it was a show.
And you got great legs,
and,
I have to say, to this day.
You can't see through my trousers. Not bad.
Was there a showstopper of your own?
Well, I used to go and make sure that my mother used to make sure we went to see all the musicals that was out, and there was a lot of musicals because that's what really kept us happy. Hollywood was well known for sending musicals out to the world to cheer the people up, and you know, we had Judy Garland, we had lots and lots of people who were the stars in our day.
Diana Durbin,
yes, and Donald O'Connor. I was Donald O'Connor once, doing Make Them Laugh, because Singing in the Rain was quite popular in the early days. Of course, I went flying because he went flying as well over the back of the settee. We put an old stool or something in the garage, and I went flying on me. As you would say in the Jewish language, I went flying on my toppers.
A lot of names were visiting Liverpool. I mean, today, you know, a lot of big names were playing Liverpool. Were you theatre-going family? Were you seeing shows?
As I grew up older, yes. As I ventured into the city, which was terrifying for me.
In what way?
Well, 17-year-old going into the city and standing outside pub doors saying, "Well, we're going." No, I don't think so. And then I'd wander in as far as the bar and look around and get terrified and go out the other door, out again. You know, it was just frightening for a 17-year-old who really wanted to be a priest. I wanted to be a priest all my life from a child. So that was hard for me to go and mix and be a little ruffian, if you like, or whatever, and that's what I thought I had to be if I wanted to hang around the town, because it wasn't long before I was told people go into town are called townies, and I didn't want to be a townie. I didn't want to be anything, just a priest. I was so desperate to be a priest. I mean, I still attend my church every Sunday. If I miss church through the week, I'm saying, if something goes wrong, if I miss church, I say, that's because you didn't go to church on Sunday to punish myself. But that's me. It's
There's a childhood friend who I see up on your wall behind you here.
right.
Can you tell us a little bit about him, how you met? And
Yes, well...
obviously there was certain influence on your life.
I told you my mother had shops, so did my father had a workshop.
A what shop?
Made furniture. We called it the workshop. And he made furniture, and he started off making little white wood stools. And in those days they didn't have fridges, but they had what they call a meat safe. It was a little wooden frame, like a cupboard, but on the door it would have like a wire mesh for or the air to go through to the food, and they were very popular. He made a lot of those, and as time went by he made better furniture and better. He got through part of just the beginning of the war making furniture, and he was noticed by the Epsteins as being a fine furniture manufacturer. In those days it was popular to have Queen Anne furniture. That's the shaped legs that go like that. And it was very hard to carve those and things, but he was self-taught and made very fine furniture. The Epsteins used to buy the furniture from him. He used to make dining room suites. As a sideboard, a table and 4 chairs. That was a dining room suite. And he'd probably make, I don't know, 1 or 2 a fortnight, and they would be automatically delivered to the Epstein shop on Walton Road. And then as we were growing up, his 5 sons, we were doing various things in the business to help him, or straight from school at 4 o'clock down to the workshop and get involved. I might be involved in, he got me involved in the veneering of the wood. You know, it's a very thin wood that's glued onto rough wood, if you like, pine or something like that, and then it's made into walnut. So I was the veneerer. My brother Gerard was the sander on a sanding machine, standing there all day with this big pad and the big belt going right round. We used to say, if that snaps, that'll apart Gerard, his throat will be cut. We used to frighten him as well. We said, be careful Gerard, any minute. Things like that. We were 5, but not, I can't say 5 of us were involved. The 3 oldest of the 5 boys was involved. And yes, we would have to deliver those 3 dining room suites to the Epsteins. Now Mr. Epstein, Brian's dad, was Harry Epstein, and he wouldn't take delivery of a dining room suite unless the drawer was taken out of the sideboard, turned over upside down, and it had to go in just as smooth as it did in its normal. Well, we couldn't understand that because it's different fractions and things like that. But when anything like that came back, my father got his brains going again, and he, you know, the joke with the Morecambe and Wise, I think it was, or no, the 2 Ronnies, 4 candles, fork handles. They were saying with it. Well, I remember that made me laugh when I heard that joke on the television, because my father used to say, go out and get 4 candles and rub the sideboard straws with the candles, and you'd turn them over and he'd say, shh, he'd hear the go, shh, because it was candle grease. They went in very smooth. Mr. Epstein was very satisfied with that. My father was satisfied with it because he was getting paid. But when we were doing this, growing up, and the war was on, and my mother was saying, you're not being evacuated to North Wales, you're staying in Huyton with me. Also, the scare, my father worked with a lot of Jewish people in Liverpool. He liked Jewish people working for him. He used to always say they had very good hands for tailoring, for furniture manufacturing, planing wood and getting wood in good nick, you know. So he had Jewish people working for him, and then he had the Epsteins, he had Mr. Cohen, I remember them all involved. My father, when he took what we called the workshop, it was a huge building in the city of Liverpool at the back of TJ Hughes's in London Road. He took this big place, and it used to be, before he had it, a service area for a big transport company. So they used to bring in their trucks and drive over a well in the road, in the building, in the floor. I forget what they used to call it now. What would they call it for if you went into a garage and this hole and you drove the wagon over? Pit. That's it.
That's the one.
Clever boy. Give that man prize.
I will.
So something.
Anyway, they would have to drive over, and then the mechanics would go underneath and check everything. But it was huge because there were huge trucks. So they had an arrangement, my father and his Jewish friends, because the scare was on. If the Germans ever got to England, what happens to your friends and what happens to the Jewish people? So it was agreed by a few families of my father and friends. We used to have rehearsals. They'd come and they'd get down in the pit. And they'd all get down there nice and comfortable, and then we would have to, he had huge sheets of plywood that went over this pit, and we would take all the shavings and sawdust and put it over this wood, and they would be in there, and we'd rehearse maybe once a fortnight or sometimes once a month for them to come. And because he was such a good furniture manufacturer, each family wanted a box which was very similar to what you might see with cutlery in a very good house, you know, a nice big solid oak or mahogany box, and all their documents were in there. And my father would make those for them, and they'd take their documents with them in that. Sometimes they were locked in certain places, which were secret places for them to hide, and that's our little deed that we did for the Jewish people of Liverpool. We're very proud of that. It's never been publicised or big things done about it, but it is something worth talking about, you know, and that's another thing that we did. But we grew up, I hated working for my father, so I couldn't get away quick enough. I wanted to be a seaman, but I wanted to be a waiter on the big ships.
Right.
And many big ships left Liverpool, the Canadian Pacific ships, Cunard ships, many left Liverpool. But you had to be a silver waiter to get on the ships because they were first class. And I wanted to be a first class waiter. So I went to work in the Adelphi Hotel to learn silver service. And while I was at the Adelphi Hotel, there was one period I got the sack from the Adelphi Hotel because somebody I mentioned before, who I used to think I was, and I'd dance like him when I went flying in the garage, was Donald O'Connor. Yeah. Well, he came to the Empire Liverpool with Margaret O'Brien, another American. Similar, she was in a lot of the Judy Garland films. There were Margaret O'Brien, Judy Garland, Donald O'Connor, all. And he, what was I going to say about that?
You got the sack?
Yes, I got the sack because while I was in the Adelphi, Donald O'Connor came to the Empire, and I wanted to go and see him live, you know, being live. And so they refused me. So I decided that I was going to eat something in the Adelphi because being a waiter, and I made sure that I told somebody before I went home, "Oh, that's made me sick." I pretended I'd been out to the toilet and vomited and something like that, and I went and told we all had a head waiter on different parts of the restaurant, the French restaurant in the Adelphi, and he said, well, you better go home. So when I came back 2 days later, I said to the head waiter, Mr. John, he was the French head waiter, I said, I'm very sorry about being off the other night. He said, yes, I heard you were very sick. I said, yes. He said, well, I noticed you weren't very sick in the Empire when I went to see Donald O'Connor. He was watching me, getting all excited. He said, you weren't very sick in the Empire, I'm sacking you now. He said, go and get your clothes, because we had waiters' clothes. Go and change your clothes and go home. You'll receive your wages by post. So that was the end of me at the Empire. And, well, that was, part of my life with music. And
Well, speaking of music, come the 50s,
yes.
rock and roll starts blasting away. You and Brian,
Yeah,
who are to play quite a part in that world.
yeah.
How did that come about? I mean,
Well, in
you-
1950 exactly, I did sing with Joe Lawson's orchestra. It was a big orchestra.
The Joe
Orchestra.
Orchestra.
27 piece.
Oh.
And I used to sing with him. I sang with him for just over 12 months. Then it came time for Joe to go in the National Service, so I had to go in the Army for 2 years.
Mm.
So by the time I came out, my young brother Lee Curtis, Peter his name is, was growing up, and by the time I came out, I said, what are you going to do with your life now that you're a big lad?
Mm.
So he said, I want to be a singer like you.
Mm.
So I said, oh, okay. So I said, maybe I should be a manager, skipping a lot. I'm jumping a lot in lots of things happen. So it was decided I was going to be his manager, and we got a band together, and he was known as Lee Curtis and the Detours at the early stage.
Oh. So this is very early stages of Mersey Beat, isn't
yes,
it, really? Yeah.
Yes, very.
Yeah.
We hadn't even entered into town yet.
Oh, right.
So,
Were you aware of the scene that was growing
well, it
in
started
town?
bubbling, we used to say.
Uh-huh.
The town's bubbling. So something going on in town. But that came a little bit later. My brother, I got him working factory, like English Electric had their own club. The British Railway had their own club. And we got work in them, and pubs and clubs was the thing. And then, as we said, something bubbling in town, and I started getting adventurous and looking around. And,
What sort of songs? What sort of music was he doing? Is it?
all cover music from
Yeah.
America.
Okay.
Yeah, all of them. Even the Beatles did cover music.
Yeah.
They did none of their own stuff. People didn't know the Beatles wrote
Mm.
songs, even in the early stages of us looking after them. They did, but John would say, I've got 100 songs. I'd say, okay, keep hold of them now. They went out singing, what did they sing? I Remember You, by Frank Highfield and Poyline.
The B.B. Shape.
Yeah,
Whatever,
people
yeah.
like that.
Mm.
They sang all those songs, all the bands did, all cover stuff. And then we got into town, but the first booking I got for Lee Curtis and the All Stars then, they changed from Detours to All Stars, was, no, tell a lie, I'm jumping a bit. It was still Lee Curtis and the Detours. I got them a booking at the Iron Door, and we got down there. It was a Sunday night booking, and got down there, and my brother started, his band started moving in, setting up, getting ready for a sound check and all that sort of stuff. And while I'm standing in the background, because it was a pretty dismal place, there was
The Iron Door.
well, they were all dismal, all the clubs and pubs, because we'd not long gone through a war.
Mm.
It was, it was only, 15 years all after rebuilding and everything like that. And warehouses were very cheap. You could get them on a peppercorn rent, as they called it. The owners or whoever had the clubs. It was very cheap. And anyway, I'm standing in the Iron Door, quite dismal, and I looked over to the far wall, and I seen this figure leaning on the wall like that, and I thought, might be somebody from the Echo wants to write about us or something like that, because that's what we were expecting, and what was going on. You know, the Echo was George Harrison, his name, not the George Harrison in the Beatles, but George Harrison, the writer. I thought maybe it's George Harrison, and I went over to her, and as I got closer, I was shocked. I said, hello Brian, what are you doing here? Nice of you to come and see us. He said, I haven't come to see you. He said, the band with you tonight, your support, is the Beatles. He said, and I've been talking to them now for a week, and I'm looking at them tonight to see if this is really the road I want to go down. So we're standing there talking, and my brother came over to me and he said, bad news. He always announced something as, bad news, headaches. That's how he'd say. Talk about the sportsman now that does this. My brother was like this, headaches. So he came to me with his headache, of course, and he said, our base equipment has broken down. I said, well, it's Sunday, what are we going to do? Nothing, nowhere open, nowhere to go. Can you just make a false repair or, you know, do it somehow? Well, we've tried. So I turned round to Brian and I said, what about your band? I said, are they bringing in their own equipment? He said, yeah, it's all standing over there waiting to set up later on. So I said, well, couldn't we borrow your bass equipment? It was only the bass amp. And he said, they're upstairs in the dressing room. So I said, do you mind if I go up and ask them? I said, can I say their manager? He said, well, I'm not really their manager. He said, but yeah, you can say it. So I toddled up the stairs, but they weren't stairs, there were steps. All these warehouses had huge steps that were well worn like that from whatever's gone on, the years gone by. Some of them were 100 years old or something. Anyway, got up to the dressing room, and the Beatles were up there, and I said, who's the bass player? And of course Paul McCartney said, I am. So I said, I've been talking to your manager downstairs. He said it's okay if I come up and ask you, is there any chance of borrowing your bass amplifier? Because ours is broken down. Oh, he said, I'll have to ask the boss. So then, from that moment, I knew who the boss was of the Beatles. It was John. He was over the far end of the dressing room, which was a huge warehouse room, about 4 floors up. And he said, John, this man wants to borrow our bass equipment. He said, what do you think? And I never ever forgotten his answer. It was brilliant, because he just shouted back to me, the show must go on, man, of course he can. It wasn't his equipment to say, of course he can, but that's the way they work together, the Beatles, you see. That made me realise how they did work together in the early stages. And it was okay, and we did it. I went down and told Brian it's okay. Paul joined me to come down to get his equipment out and put it on without us. And of course Brian was delighted that it got on well, so you know that they agreed. And then as the night went by, Brian said to me, he said, I go to a pub in Whitechapel. He said, it's called the Beehive. I said, I know, that's where you go for your lunch, don't you? I said, yeah. So he said, do you fancy coming over with me and we'll have a drink? So we went over and yeah, we had a drink and we got talking, and that was the night that it was decided that I would be the booking manager for his new band, and he'd be the personal manager, because he said to me, you're very, very softly spoken, Brian Epstein, very, very public school boy, like hello and things like that. He said, Joe, I can't go into pubs and clubs asking for bookings for a band now, can I? Things like that. So I said, not really. So that's the way the conversation went, and that's when we shook hands, and that's how I became the booking manager for the Beatles and all of Brian's artists that he booked and signed up until they left for London, which he wanted me to go to London with them. To his new office situation. I'm jumping again a lot of what went on. And he said to me, I said, no, I'm off to Hamburg. I'm going to Hamburg with my band. We're booking in Hamburg.
This is with your brother?
With my brother,
yeah.
Yes. and off to the Star Club we went. Now, jumping again, had I have gone with Brian, and my brother would have gone in with that stable, when Brian died, he had an appointment in his office on the Monday when he died on the Saturday night, Sunday. He died Saturday night, Sunday. He had an appointment in his office with Robert Stigwood, who worked in his office at the time. He was one of his scouts, and the appointment was to be talking to the Bee Gees, and he would have signed up the Bee Gees there and then, but he died. And had I have gone and not Robert Stigwood, I'd been in the position that Robert Stigwood had, and probably I'd have signed the Bee Gees over to Brian if he'd have been alive, or I'd have ended up with the Bee Gees as Robert Stigwood would. I'm only saying that's what could have happened.
Turn left,
Things had
turn
gone
right,
differently.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I went off to Hamburg and I lived there, stayed there for 4 years. The management of the Star Club was satisfied with my performance because I didn't know the owner was standing behind me one particular night, and I said, this can't go on like this, me being the bossy one, and saying, this can't go on like this, you know, people don't know what time they're going on, and you're all standing there saying, no, I'm on next, and you're on next. And this is the way the bands were, not fighting, but, you know, discussing things that should have been discussed in the afternoon as a meeting or something like that, and I didn't like that.
How different was Hamburg to Liverpool, the music scene on both places? And
Well, Hamburg was, they were booked for a month, and they played 3 times per night, except Sundays for that month. And we always said this is a damn good rehearsal ground, and get your show together and go home wherever you were going, what part you were going.
the audiences, how different were they to Liverpool to?
Very similar,
to what you got
really.
Who were they? Well, young people, old people,
Youngish,
middle age?
Yeah, young. I would say 18 to 20 in the starting of it. But we used to have to announce at 10 o'clock on the spot. Announce at 10 o'clock. We used to have to say to the younger. We used to say younger. What was the word? Younger publican or whatever. Public. Rouse. That's quick. Get out. Because you've got to be out of here, otherwise we lose our licence.
Right.
Because they weren't supposed to be in there after 10 o'clock. And we'd have to get them all out, and then the older people would come in, and then tourists used to wander in. There was, you know, all sorts of people coming off the streets of Hamburg.
What sort of act did your brother have? How would you describe him? Was he unique?
What didn't do him any favours was he was always described as Liverpool's Elvis Presley. He didn't.
And this was the 60s now.
Yes,
Yeah.
but he didn't sing like him. He didn't want to sing like him. He just did. If you heard him now singing in that garden, it says that Elvis out there.
Really?
Or he didn't want to look like him, but he did. You know, and when he stayed in Germany and he could sing songs of Elvis Presley, which then they expected him to, he'd sing some of the German songs, the songs that Elvis sang in German while he was based over there. And he'd sing in German, and then he got his own television show, interviewing people and talking. He did very well. He still does well. He goes over there a lot. He was a lot of. He went into wine, women, and song, which didn't suit me. I couldn't manage him, so we had to part company because of his. I called it his antics. I didn't come for this.
Drawing a line.
I didn't come over for this. And, you know, I was more businesslike.
Right.
You know, and wanted to be strict. But then you see, he had a wife and his children were my nieces and nephews, and I couldn't stand it. So I had to tell him. That was the end of that. It's in the book.
So can you tell us about some of the other artists that you managed around about that time?
Beryl Marsden.
Marsden.
Still look after Beryl Marsden. She's like my daughter.
I have to say I found that one of the most entertaining parts of your book.
Yeah.
And Have you had ulcers by any chance at any point? Those early days with Beryl.
Well, it's a one
as somebody who's handled art or attempted to
what
myself.
you're saying now, it's funny you should say that. I was sitting with Beryl at this weekend just gone.
Has she changed?
She has. She's turned over, what can we say, a new leaf, or she's woke up to the fact that she could have been very big. The thing is, I had to bring her home. I had her working in Berlin because we did a franchise business with the Star Club, and with me being in charge of the stage and stage manager, I had to join most of the bands that was going out from the Star Club into these franchises in all different towns, and one of them was in Berlin, and I had to take Beryl Marsden. She was only 16, and I had to, before I took Beryl Marsden, when I told you that Mersey Beats cried.
You mentioned this about the Mersey Beat. Tell me again.
Well, let me bring that in now
Yes.
into this same story now, because it involves two 16-year-old boys and a 16-year-old girl. Well, I found it easier for me to go to London, to Bow Street Court, and sign a document as her guardian till she was 18. And I found that easier for me to do, to represent a young girl and look after a young girl. Her mother was 100% behind me. That was okay. She didn't have a father, so it was her mother's decision. And then the two lads, the Mersey Beats, were on the scene, and I gave them work before I left.
This is Tony and Billy.
Tony and Billy, and I gave them lots of work. I got lots of contracts in this house. My old office, I call it the office. It's a room. It's with my office stored in it, and files of all the artists and bands and everything that I ever worked with, and there's a lot there for Mersey Beats. So they wanted to go to the Star Club Hamburg, and I said, I can't take you there. And I just found it awkward for me to go and represent in London two young boys of 16. You know, it wasn't my cup of tea to... I didn't fancy what would be said by different various people of outlets. Oh, he's taken two young lads to Hamburg. You know, you have to go through all that situation. So I decided, no, I can't do it. And he said, please, Joe. And Billy talked about it only recently about it to me, and he said, I understood you now, and I understand your position that you were in, he said, and it was easier for it. Anyway, I got Beryl there, working with Beryl. I made her, she was always guest to Lee Curtis and the All-Stars. He was there back in Bangor. He introduced her into the show, and she was his guest at most shows that we did. Then this franchise came up, and we got a band for Beryl. Sent her to Berlin, and while she's in Berlin working, I'm standing at the side, standing in the wings, at the side of the stage with the owner of the club. It was a lady, and she said, you should take this little girl home. I said, yes, I will. When she's finished, I'll get her to the hotel. Don't worry about that. I'm a guardian, I look after her. She said, no, you should get her home to England. I said, why? She said, she is with child. I said, I don't think so. I was saying to myself, well, don't look at stomachs and things like that. Are you pregnant? Or, you know, she just didn't appear that way to me, but to this woman, she knew. And when Beryl came off the stage, I went into the dressing room after she, you know, dressed up and got freshed up. I said, I've been told I've got to get you home to England. She said, what for, why? I said, the lady, the owner, who you met earlier, I said, she said, you're pregnant, are you? And she burst out crying immediately. She said, yes, how can I couldn't tell you, and I couldn't tell anybody. And she was, you know, very upset. And I said, well, we better start making plans for you going home. As soon as you finish this work in Berlin, I'll talk to the Star Club and we'll cancel your contract and we'll get you home. And I took her home to her mother. Took her home to her mother. And, well, she was out of the business for quite some time, to a time that she even married somebody that she didn't love, and he was quite cruel to her. and that's the kind of life that she's led. But you see, I know I'm a good manager. I know I'm a good thinker and a good arranger. But I had two artists. One was a wine, women and song merchant. The other one got herself pregnant. And over the years, people have said, they're brilliant. Why couldn't you do it? Why didn't you do it? So I've had to, over the years, prove that nothing to do with me. That was their personal life.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
And
how would you describe Beryl as an artist?
as an artist,
How does she
fantastic.
differ from
And
other
yeah.
female artists of the 60s?
Well, if you look behind you, I've got a plaque there to hand over to Cilla Black's family, which I
All right.
received last Sunday. That's a plaque that I received for Cilla Black.
Yeah.
Now, she didn't have the voice, really, that she could have done herself without George Martin and his clever workings of being a producer. But she had the gall and she had the business head. She was very, very businesslike. But Beryl was a shy type, very quiet. Sometimes you felt like as though you've got to push her on the stage. This is over the years. But lately, in the last, say, 12 months, she's blossomed. And she's brilliant. Her voice is fantastic. Everybody's saying, my God, you know, where does that voice come from? And she's working wonders at the moment. But I've never, ever neglected her in friendship. I've always been there for her. I've advised her. I've helped her with some